David Bursty here, new episode of Scales and Tales. This is Thinking Outside the Box, and I actually started teaching guitar when I was about 17 years old and was hired by a local music store as a teacher. And since that time, I've had hundreds of guitar students ask about breaking out of boxes and getting away from pentatonic patterns and fingerings on the fretboard. So this is a really common problem area for a lot of players. And it does seem like once players move away from pentatonic scales, they seemingly throw them in the trash, and they refer to them as too basic or too simple. But definitely, pentatonic scales are eternally useful in music and on the guitar. And this episode is going to basically help you see the scale in different ways and perform it in some different ways on the fretboard. And while we're going to still be locked into the minor pentatonic scale, you're going to find some really different ways and approaches of using it. And as Paul Gilbert's mentioned before, the minor pentatonic scale is the scale that wouldn't die. And we're going to breathe some new life into the scale in this lesson. So here we go. Since I'm not sharing any band history or guitarist history, we can dive right in, and we're going to be looking at the minor pentatonic scale in the key of A minor. And I know that's kind of basic and boring, but I chose that key for a reason. There's no sharps or flats. It's much easier to kind of see what we're doing, and I didn't want to lose or confuse anybody out there. So the A minor pentatonic box is right here. And that very common, box formation right there in the 5th position in A minor. And that's basically why it's referred to as a box. It kind of looks like one right there because it's locked into that same position. Now right there you could actually look at that a couple different ways. Before we even leave the box to start thinking outside of that box, you could actually view that a couple different ways. You could view that as an A minor 11 arpeggio. That might seem kind of strange, but if you think of an A minor arpeggio right here, A, C, E, and then think of A minor 7, and then if we think of A minor 11, lo and behold, it's the minor pentatonic scale, because there's your minor 7, and then if we add that 4th, which is your 11, that D note, it magically becomes minor pentatonic. And one thing I like to share with students that are interested in breaking out of boxes or moving away and kind of thinking, outside of these pentatonic boxes is string skipping. And I've shared this in other lessons on this channel, but we're just going to take that A minor pentatonic box and leapfrog or string skip through it like this. And I'm literally just string skipping my way through it. And once I skip over that A string, then I go back and pick up that A string and then skip to the G string. And you just continue that idea all the way through. You can descend and use pull-offs. It's a really interesting way of kind of moving and navigating through that scale, and that breaks you away from just that really locked-in kind of box formation of notes. Here's an alternating note sequence I like to use with students, and this definitely helps them think differently about that box before we start moving away from it. I'm kind of shaking things up while we're still kind of locked into it. But this alternating note sequence, we're grabbing the scale, but then we're just literally grabbing the lowest note on the first string, the higher note on the next string, and then the lower note on the next string like this. And we're literally just kind of mixing and matching. So I just played all the way through A minor pentatonic, but it didn't sound like pentatonic, right? It has this kind of sci-fi kind of sound, almost like, Star Trek or something. Very unusual, but that's still A minor pentatonic. So let's break out of that box and start thinking, outside of those pentatonic boxes. So we're not going to do this. And what I want you to do is just basically pinpoint that first octave, A, C, D, E, G, A, this part. And we're going to arrange those notes in a completely different way. Let's just line them up on one string. Let's use the A string, and instead of this, let's do it like this. And there's your A, C, D, E, G, A. The same notes, A, C, D, E, G, A. You could throw some taps in there. But the important thing there is you're seeing that scale in a completely different light. You know, instead of that, you're seeing it like that. And we could do this on other strings. Let's move to the G string. There's your A, and I want you to notice this, you know, A, C, D, E, where you've got this whole step pattern right there. Notice that, because we're going to recycle that on other strings. So here's A, and then scoot up to C, there's D, there's E, tap your G, tap your A, and you're doing the same thing an octave higher. Do it on the high E. Grab this high A right there, slide up to C, D, E, there's your G, and there's your A if you want to tap like that. But the important thing here is you're seeing that minor pentatonic transform into other fingerings and ideas on the fretboard. Another concept I like to share with students that are wanting to think outside the box is taking one phrase and then taking that exact same, you know, pitch and everything, and then moving and shifting that phrase through different positions and octaves on the fretboard. So we're going to start way down here. It's just a really basic kind of blues, you know, rock phrase like that. That E, D, C, and then end on A. But that's our melody right there. So let's see how many different ways we can play that exact same melody on the fretboard. So we could do it right there. We could also slide into another position. And then we're actually moving into A minor pentatonic, the box that we had earlier, right? You could do it right there. We could incorporate a bend on that D note to that E. Like that. And we're really just mutating that basic, you know, beginning phrase. Different ways of doing the same thing. There's another one right there. Start on that E, shift that D to E on the G, and walk your way down to that A note. And then right there, you do something like that. Grab that E, D, and then slide with your index. You can end on that A note. Different ways. Right there, I just literally traveled the entire fretboard and found all these different mutations and variations of that. And that's going to force you to not only understand and learn those different positions of A minor pentatonic for one thing, but it's also showing you how you can start thinking outside of this minor pentatonic box, and you're weaving all through the fretboard through these different positions. That's eye-opening right there for sure. So let's find some more fingering variations for the scale. So once again, you know, here's the box. And let's find a totally different way of playing that. So now we're going to do this. And there's the same scale. And you can see I've actually lined it up like that. So we have this, you know, starting note, that A, and then there's our C, D, E. And then you've got G, A on the D string, and then there's your C, D, E again on the G. And then I just ended it right there with this G, A, C, A, which is how the end of that box ends, right there. Right? We could move all the way through it. And do something like that. But that's basically A minor pentatonic, but not like that. Like this. Up next is one of my favorite pentatonic mutations. These are stretch pentatonics, and this is much harder, but they're definitely wicked. And we're going to take A minor pentatonic way up here and combine that position with this position, the next position of A minor pentatonic. And then we're going to basically grab, you know, in that first shape, we're going to grab these notes along the A, G, and high E, and then in that next position we're grabbing this. And And then we're going to combine those like this. Really wicked right there. And we're literally, we're not really playing the full scale, we're leaving a few notes out, but it's definitely hinting at A minor pentatonic when you play that. You could sequence it. And there I'm literally grabbing the first 4 notes and then coming back down. And I'm also doing that kind of sequence on the G and the high E right there. Sounds like Paul Gilbert right there. And we could also transfer this down to that lower position, like the box right here. And we could do something like this. It's much stretchier down here, but there's the same thing. Last but not least is Paul Gilbert's mighty 3-note per string blues scale, and we're going to keep this in the key of A minor. And this was actually in Paul Gilbert's first instructional video, Intense Rock 1. And we're going to basically, get away from the minor pentatonic finally. Now we're playing the blues scale, so we've just changed one note, or added one note, the flat 5 right there. So that dreaded, the flat 5 right there. But what we're going to do now, instead of doing that, we're going to arrange it 3 notes per string. So this is really stretchy, and it's definitely going to impress your neighbors, but we're doing this. It's the same thing, but arranged this way. Now move up an octave and do the exact same thing. So we're linking octaves right here, and we've definitely talked about octave linking on this channel. But we're doing the exact same thing we did here, an octave higher. And then do it again, an octave higher right here. You can see there's your root, minor, third, there's your 4th, there's the flat 5, the 5th, and the flat 7. So there's everything you need for, A blues, but lined up, and stretched out 3 notes per string. Really wicked sounding. Especially if you start sequencing and kind of moving through those positions. It's really awesome, but it's also very advanced and pretty hard to play too, but so cool. That's going to wrap this episode of Scales and Tales with thinking outside the box. And literally, there are hundreds, if not thousands, or tens of thousands of other, ideas and exercises and, concepts you could explore to help you break away from these really, locked in pentatonic boxes. And it's really frustrating when you feel trapped in that box. But the first step from kind of liberating yourself from those boxes is just really noticing what's going on your fretboard. Understanding the notes on the fretboard, connecting different positions and moving, from one position to the next, and really navigating things, on the neck. And that's kind of the secret, because once you understand how everything's mapped out, then you're going to have a much easier time moving around and breaking out of these boxes, and definitely thinking outside of those pentatonic boxes. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.